Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the InnerViews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down how Maurizio Sarri got his tactics wrong in Juventus' 2-1 loss to Napoli in Serie A action. But before we do that, don't forget to give our video a thumbs up if you do enjoy it. The bell below does give you daily notifications regarding our organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on our road to 3K subscribers. So when we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Napoli in a 4-3-3 that became a 4-5-1 without the ball. And we saw Juventus in their midfield diamond that was shifted into a 4-1-3-2. So when we do break that down and we do assess how Juventus looked to approach the game, the way that they did look to press from the front did help them close down Napoli, and they were able to ensure that Napoli struggled to create chances from open play. When they pressed high from goal kicks, it didn't really work out in their favor, and Napoli were able to bypass them. But Juventus's overall shape, given the fact that they did have 4v3 in midfield, did work out in their favor. What we ended up seeing there was we had the two strikers closing down Manolas and Di Lorenzo. We saw Dybala stepping out to Deme, and then what would happen here is that you'd have the shuttlers in Matuidi and Bentancur taking turns in pressing out the fullbacks when they did receive the ball. So what we initially saw from that midfield was that it was Bentancur against Zielinski and Fabian Ruiz against Blaise Matuidi, with Pjanic in a deeper role. However, when the ball was shifted out to the Napoli fullbacks in Mario Rui or Hisai, we would see Matuidi or Bentancur step into those positions. So for instance, if the ball shifted out to Mario Rui, we would see Bentancur step out into the path of the Napoli fullback and Pjanic look to step in for cover, and vice versa. If the ball was shifted out to Hisai, then we would see Matuidi shift over into that space and have Pjanic step into that zone. So that's how Juventus looked to close down Napoli in terms of their overall shape, and frankly, they did do a good job there. The first avenue to goal for Napoli did stem through Insigne. What we often saw from Insigne here is that he was dropping off deeper to try and pull out Cuadrado or shift out into those narrow positions, and that would create space for Mario Rui to push forward, given the fact that Juventus didn't have a player tracking his runs unless they did have Bentancur shift out. So with that being said, Insigne's movement in that left zone was key, but what ended up happening here was that when he dropped off deeper away from Cuadrado, that's where he was able to pick out passes. We did see him drop off to receive the ball in the left channel in Juve's half to locate Callejon running off Alexandro, but that deep cross saw Callejon direct a tame effort at Szczesny, and later on in that half, we ended up seeing Insigne drop off into his own half to pick up the ball, and what he ended up locating was Milik making a darting run in between the center backs beyond De Ligt, but when Milik received the ball in left half space, his first touch did get away from him, and it allowed Bonucci to come across and clear the ball out for a corner kick. The other avenue that Napoli looked to exploit was out in those deeper, wider areas with the fullbacks, and they were trying to get quick switches out to the fullbacks to pull Juve out of position. And the reason why they're able to do that is because, like I said, when you look at Juventus's overall shape, they have the midfield markers blocked out of the game, but there was no one really looking to shift out to ensure that the fullbacks were covered. So they were the spare men here. And what we ended up seeing from them is that if they could hit that crossfield pass, that does pull out a shuttler and it forces Pjanic to get to that shuttler's marker quickly. And that allows Napoli, if they're able to play quick passes, to bypass Juve's midfield bank. When we look to the first example, it's Mario Rui playing a crossfield pass into Hisai, and Matuidi should be stepping out here, but he is occupied by Fabian Ruiz, and that does see Alexandro push out of his left back zone to try and close down Hisai. But when he does do that, that leaves space for Callejon to drift into the touchline, and it allows Hisai to play the ball beyond Alexandro into the path of Callejon. That does push out Bonucci to shift over, but when Callejon tried to find the run of Milik and Fabian Ruiz breaking into the box, his cross was delivered in but cleared by Cuadrado. But again, like I said, Matuidi doesn't step out. It forces Alexandro to pull out of his position, and now Napoli are able to bypass Juve and get into a good attacking zone, and frankly, Callejon should have done better there. Shortly after that, what we end up witnessing is another Juventus breakdown from their pressing, but it did stem through Napoli switching the field of play swiftly. What ends up happening here is that we did have Bentancur stepping into the path of Mario Rui, which means that Pjanic was shifting out into the path of Zielinski to close down the spare man. And what ended up happening is that the ball was played back into the path of Di Lorenzo, who was closed down by Higuain. And what Di Lorenzo was able to do is that he was able to switch the ball out into the path of Hisai. So Hisai ends up receiving the crossfield pass, and that pulls out Matuidi. But with Pjanic out of position, someone has to step into the path of Fabian Ruiz for Matuidi, who was closing down Hisai. Alexandro does do that. So when Alexandro does look to step into that path, we see Milik pull out De Ligt. So Milik pulls out De Ligt, Callejon ends up shifting laterally into the path of Bonucci and Cuadrado, which does leave a big gap there. And when Hisai looks to clip the ball into the path of Milik, what he ends up doing is he flicks the ball into the path of Callejon. So Callejon receives the ball, we have Pjanic retreating, we have De Ligt looking to drop off into the path of Callejon, but Callejon drops the ball off now into the spare man that is Zielinski, based off the fact that Pjanic is looking to get back into position. But with Pjanic getting back into position and De Ligt looking to retrieve his position near Callejon, that allows Milik to peel into the right channel, and Zielinski picks him out, darting into that space. The issue with Napoli's attack here is that when Milik gets into a 1v1 battle with Bonucci towards the edge of the box, he tries to cut in, but he doesn't do good enough there, and he ends up firing a tame effort off Bonucci out for a corner. But once again, Juventus did a good job of closing down Napoli's left side, but because they often had that cross-field switch available due to Juventus's narrow shape, that was the manner in which Napoli were able to bypass Juve's shape, and frankly, they should have done better there. However, when we look at Napoli, they were a 4-3-3 that did shift into a 4-5-1 without the ball. And the biggest issue here was the fact that they would be 4-3 in midfield. Nonetheless, they did a very good job of coping with Juventus in that opening half. Some of it is down to Napoli's organization and discipline, and the other half of it is down to Sarri's tactics. What we see here is that, like I said, you have that midfield battle set, Zielinski against Bentancur. You have Fabian Ruiz stepping into the path of Matuidi, and Deme was looking to occupy Dybala, who was anonymous throughout. So you have those three blocked out of the game, but you still have Miralem Pjanic free in that deeper zone. What we initially saw was that Milik was dropping off a bit deeper and looking to block off that passing lane into Pjanic. That duty wasn't expected of Milik throughout the entire game because it just was simply unlikely for him to be able to do that. But he did do a good job in those earlier stages. So you had Milik occupying the space of Pjanic. You had the wider players in Callejon and Insigne closing down the fullbacks, and then you had Dybala marked out of the game as well. So this was good for Napoli based off the fact that the fullbacks could tuck in narrow so that there wasn't always a 2v2 battle in those zones. But nonetheless, we did see different variations of Napoli looking to close down Pjanic here. There were times initially where we did have Milik step out to the center backs, and if he did step out into the path of Bonucci for say, then we would see Zielinski step out into the path of De Ligt, and Deme would come across into the path of Bentancur. Press high, sacrifice Dybala having that free space. You could have the fullbacks or even a center back step forward, and even if they're able to play that long ball into the path of Dybala, by the time he does control it, you could have Deme shift back into his position. So that's how they look to close down from the front if Milik did step to the center backs. The other manner that they could go about things, and we did see this often, was still have a shuttler step out into the path of Pjanic, but he stayed within close proximity of his shuttling marker. So even if we did say, let's see, Zielinski step out into the path of Pjanic, he would look to try and block off the passing lane into Bentancur. But if Pjanic was able to play that pass, he was in close proximity to step out and be able to shift across. Pjanic was unable to really dictate the tempo of the game from those deeper positions, and he was often forced into short passes, and that was one way that they could go about it. And the other manner that they could get the shuttlers to step into Pjanic was when we saw Bentancur or Matuidi shift out into wider positions to occupy the fullbacks, because then you have the fullbacks occupying the shuttler, and you could have Zielinski or Fabian Ruiz step out into those zones. Like I said, Gattuso could have the fullbacks step out into the path of the spare man if he did have the shuttler step out to Pjanic, but we often didn't see that. But nonetheless, this was a very narrow and compact Napoli shape, and it played into their hands based off the fact that we weren't getting much width from Juve throughout. With Pjanic taken out of the game, Bonucci could be the anchor from deeper positions, but his passing was poor. Ronaldo and Dybala were often looking to drop off into those pockets to show for the ball, but not offering much of a threat besides that. We did see Ronaldo on a few occasions drifting out into those wider zones, but once again, the fullbacks were free, so that wasn't a big issue for them. And the other issue with Juventus's overall play in that first half was that they didn't have enough crosses played into the box. You have Ronaldo and Higuain in the box who can peel off to the fullbacks at the back post where they do have that aerial advantage, and we didn't see that enough. We saw Cuadrado play a few crosses that were often overhit, one that did get to Ronaldo but he couldn't control it, and there was one occasion where Bentancur shifted out into a wider position to deliver a cross, but Manolas cleared it away. But again, not enough width from this Juventus side. They were playing narrow, trying to play through the center of the pitch, but with Napoli dropping off into that narrow 4-5-1 without the ball, that played into their hands because they welcomed all that play in the center of the pitch, knowing that they were clogging out those zones for Juve to exploit. And frankly, Sarri needed to make some tactical adjustments. However, when we look to the second half, we didn't see much of a tactical change from Sarri initially. Juve were still trying to play through the center of the pitch, and like I said, Napoli were comfortable with that. And eventually what ended up happening was that Pjanic was unable to continue, and we ended up seeing Sarri forced into a substitution. He brought on Rabiot for Pjanic, and that pushed Bentancur into a deeper position. And frankly, that does limit Juve's ability to create from deeper positions, and we didn't see much from Bentancur for large spells of that second half. Nonetheless, we did see Juve try to get more crosses into the box from the left-hand side, but once again, even when Alexandro and Matuidi did get into those zones, their crosses were often overhit, and that's a big issue for Juventus. Ironically, from that pattern of play, Napoli were able to go ahead, and it was Matuidi delivering a poor cross into the box, which saw Insigne break from his own half, combined with Zielinski. And the big issue with Napoli's opener was the fact that Insigne was able to run from his box to Juve's box, and when he did get that initial shot off, neither Alexandro, Bonucci, or Bentancur looked to close him down. He forced a save out of Szczesny, and it was a poor effort from Szczesny, who pushed the ball into the path of Zielinski, getting ahead of Cuadrado. Shortly after Napoli's opener, we did see both managers turn to their bench. Lobotka came on for Deme, who was on a booking, and we saw Sarri try to shift the pattern of the game. He brought on Bernardeschi and Douglas Costa, and what we saw there was that Rabiot shifted to the left of the midfield trio. We had Douglas Costa, who was often predominantly occupying space out on the right touchline, and Bernardeschi was trying to make runs beyond Lobotka into space between Di Lorenzo and Mario Rui. Nonetheless, Juve still struggled to create chances from that avenue, and we continue to see Napoli trying to shift the direction of play with crossfield passes to get into good attacking zones. We ended up seeing Mario Rui shift the ball out into the path of Hisai, which did see Rabiot step out into that path, and that does free up Fabian Ruiz, but the issue here was that Bentancur didn't step into the path of Fabian Ruiz. So that ball is eventually bypassing Rabiot into the path of Fabian Ruiz, who's able to break at Alexandro as Bentancur shifts over. And with Callejon adopting a narrow position, what he ends up doing is he darts in between Bonucci and Alexandro to receive Fabian Ruiz's ball across Alexandro. So Callejon receives the ball in that right channel, and what we end up seeing here is Callejon deliver a cross to the edge of the box for Insigne breaking into that zone, but he can only acrobatically guide his effort over the net. That was a warning sign for Juventus, but once again, Napoli sticking to their principles of shifting play from flank to flank because they have the fullbacks vacant in those zones. We eventually saw Elmas come on for Zielinski in midfield. And what we ended up seeing from Sarri to try and combat that was he shifted Juve into a 4-3-3, with Douglas Costa still occupying the right touchline, but Ronaldo playing in a narrow position off the left and Bernardeschi moving into the right side of midfield. Nonetheless, Napoli were able to kill off the game shortly after that, and it stemmed through more great play from Insigne down that left-hand zone. Llorente eventually did come on for Milik, and even though Juventus were unable to rescue the game here, what we saw in those final 5 minutes sums up the issues with Sarri's initial approach. They were able to trim the lead to 1 goal from a long ball from Bentancur, but we didn't see this from Juventus throughout that game. Bentancur plays that long ball over the top of the Napoli defense, and we end up seeing Ronaldo peel off Di Lorenzo and get goal side of Mario Rui to receive the ball, and he poked it beyond Merit, who frankly should have been off his line much quicker to clean up that danger. But again, Ronaldo didn't receive many balls over the top to try and chase him behind that Napoli defense, and we didn't see many adventurous passes from Bentancur throughout that second half. And that showcased the fact that Juventus need to be a bit more direct with their play rather than trying to squeeze short, intricate passes in those clogged central zones. And shortly after that, we saw Douglas Costa crossfield pass into Cuadrado on that right side of the pitch. And before Cuadrado could get closed down, he located Higuain, making a darting run across the center backs, and his short cross into Higuain resulted in an acrobatic overhead kick into the path of Merit. But when you break down that game as a whole, those final 5 minutes sum up what Juventus lack throughout their overall play this season. Not enough balls into the strikers, not enough crosses into the box when they play with 2 strikers, and frankly, this was very simple for Napoli. Drop off into that 4-5-1, have Milik help ensure that Pjanic can't dominate those central areas with that 4v3 advantage, and when you have that space in those wider areas, try and get the fullbacks forward and try to get Insigne involved as much as possible. Napoli did that, and when they dropped off into that 4-5-1, they clogged the center of the pitch that Juventus consistently tried to penetrate, and they did a good job in stifling those attacking zones. But let me know what you guys think. Are Juventus still favorites to win Serie A? Does Sarri need to be a bit more flexible with his tactics, or does Juventus need to make a managerial change? And what about Napoli? Do you think they could finish in the top 4 this season? Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And once again, if you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.